like Tyler, I've just got a few notes, and Tom, thanks. So I'm going to ask you to maybe imagine a few slides in a minute or so. So no PowerPoints, but thanks again, and again, really appreciate the amount of folks and a diverse group in this room. So I really appreciate that opportunity to share some of my thoughts and my ideas. Going back to the questions, I won't put them up again. I think Russ shared them earlier. And as a ministry, as you heard, I work with the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and as being part of government, one of our overall objectives there, and if you look at some of our strategic objectives as a government, we hear from our ministry as well, is to how do we support and enable safe, resilient communities. That's really what it's about. How do we ensure our community is safe and resilient to jobs, safe from fires, and not just fires, but flood hazards. We've seen a lot of flooding in Grand Forks recently, landslides in our communities. There are a lot of hazards out there beyond just the wildfire. And these are all part of our commitment towards safe communities. So what do we do as government as a basis? And I will not get into the bureaucracy type part of the discussion there, but we do provide that regulatory framework that enables a lot of the work we've heard and seen about in the last 2 days. We have staff in the background providing the permissions, the authorities, the permits, whatever it takes to do that work. So we have folks out there providing that support in the background, but we'll not talk about that either today. I really want to talk about what we've been here for, and there is some funding. We heard shortage of funding, and we'll get into some of the lack of funding for some of these treatments. But there is money out there. Recent years we've heard about both our provincial government, federal government has made some announcements around funding for treatments, wildfire mitigation, and on the carbon file, the Forest Carbon Initiative as well. So locally, what do? How do we maximize that investment? My bosses have said to me, Garth, you get out there and try and maximize those opportunities on the landscape within your region. So how do we do that, and how do we enable those treatments on the ground that we want to do to get to those safe communities? So there is funding there. It's not enough, but and we'll get to that again instead, but how do we maximize that investment on the landscape? So what we've been doing locally, and I've got staff, Julie's here today, and Julie's sitting in a role, and we hired an integrated investment specialist and said we need an integrated investment plan. And that word integrated, I'll come back to it, because it's all about the integration that we need on the landscape with communities, with the proponents, with the objectives on the land base. So think of that, and that's the slide I'm going to ask you to imagine out there behind me here, is we have a number of factors driving what we do on the land base. There's the funding, and there's funding coming out. We call them pots of funding. We've heard of the Forest Enhancement Society. There's the Forest Carbon Initiative, the Low Carbon Economy Fund. I'll try not to use any of the acronyms. We have Columbia Basin Trust, Rural Dividend, and I think there are a number of those. They list about 10, 12 different funding pots out there. We have all of our land objectives. We've heard ecosystem restoration, fuel mitigation that we need to do, carbon objectives. So we've now got this bunch of pots of funding. We have all these objectives on the land base, and then we need the delivery agents of how do we deliver this work on the land. And we have what we would call proponents, stakeholders, communities, governments are all involved in this. First Nations, the key part of that. So the role we're playing now as government is how do we bring those different pieces together to get the right formula, the right recipe, the right menu. And then obviously we've heard over the last 2 days all of the different factors driving those different pieces. So we have a critical role to play to bring that all together, to facilitate the conversations that are needed, align that funding to the right treatment on the ground, and basically support the client, our applicants. So we are working with applicants out there, and Tom and others, we're sitting having these conversations around coffee room tables, around rooms like that. So that's the key part of this role of moving forward. But the other piece is ensuring, we get the value for the money. We are spending the dollars that we've announced, $400 million out there. How do we get the right value for tax dollars being spent on the land base? Key part of what we're doing. And then supporting the knowledge. Yesterday, I think I talked about that. Ensuring we have the right knowledge on climate change, on ecosystem management, and we've heard that today, some of the challenges of stocking on the land base. So you're managing for 400, 700, 1,200 when you've got all the various factors. So those are the pieces, the research, trying to pull that together, that we as government will be playing a role. We are doing that and continually learning what that will require as we move forward in the future to get those safe communities. So just quickly on that question around some of the challenges, I touched on it, funding, $200, $300, $400 million, it's not going to do it. So how do we scale it? How do we maximize those opportunities on the land base? How do we prioritize treatments to where it's going to have the largest effect? And how do we reduce the costs? Stefan talked about yesterday when we had, I think it was the Fulman Commission came out in 2003 and some funding came through Strategic Wildfire Prevention Initiative through UBCM, SWIPE. And you saw the map, I think, Stefan, the map you had yesterday, and you just showed a few little spots that were treated, and how do we scale that to the landscape, bring the costs down. Key challenge for us, and I think we are seeing some gains there now, no longer spending $7,000, $10,000. I've heard in Whistler they're spending about $20,000, $30,000 a hectare to treat around the community of Whistler. I know it's nuts. So how do we scale it? How do we ensure the treatment's aligned? And I think we've heard it from everyone. How do we align to meet the ecosystem needs, the forest health needs? Douglas fir beetle is growing out there, balancing for that. The future state, climate change, is obviously there and something we have to factor in, the research and science around that. What about the community values? How do we build those in? We heard that clearly, getting that right balance for the water, wildlife retention, recreation, First Nations values, the visuals. You know, we've heard some good examples. I think Eric yesterday, you know, to say you have 90%, I think, community support for the treatments there. How do we build on that? How we learn from that? And duplicate that across the land base. Because we do have these jurisdictional issues. We have Crown land out there, municipal lands, private lands, First Nations, federal lands, parks, all interacting, and as we heard yesterday, fires do not respect those boundaries. They will just flow right through. So the integration of those treatments is a key part that we as government are playing, continue to play, and still learning how to better integrate that, those treatments on the land base. And then just the last one on that, and I wouldn't call it a challenge, but it's an opportunity. Recently, we heard about yesterday from Madeline, the Abbott-Chapman report came out with 108 recommendations. So going forward in the next coming months, and for those of you who haven't read it, I'd encourage you, pull it out, have a look. The 108 recommendations there, and how are we going to take those recommendations and then factor them in? Because like all processes, we will continue to learn, we continue to evolve, we have to adjust and change in growing times. So that's on fuel mitigation. I'm just going to move back again on the carbon management piece, touch on that briefly. How do you increase carbon? Obviously, we heard it from Karen yesterday, plant more trees and burn less waste. So it's simple, so I'll stop there. Actually, no, not quite. So it's not that simple, and I touched on it this morning, that if we're going to be planting more trees, how are we planting those trees? Are we planting in the right place? A couple of years ago, a quick story, we had the fire that went through Rock Creek, just west of there, and Grand Forks burnt 30 homes. But that Rock Creek fire, if you look at some of the history and go back 30 years, a fire ripped through that valley again, and we went and reforested those areas, planted it all up. 30 years later, we have not harvested those trees, fire's taken it out again. So do we have the right approach? Probably not. So we got to rethink, and so that's the work we're doing now. Judy, I know, is looking at, well, where do we reforest? Where do we allow the grass to come back and manage for cattle? Is it the right approach? So those discussions are key pieces going forward on the carbon piece, and knowing when to plant 400 stems per hectare or 1,700. I've got 2 minutes here, and I'm not going to have a chance to talk about my favorite topic is less burning. And but we've heard quite a bit about it this morning. Some of the challenges, we do need to burn less, but what is stopping us? Obviously, there are 200 people in here have 200 ideas of how we can utilize the fiber out there. There's some great ideas coming on bioenergy, pellets, community heating plants, pulp production, 3D printing from lignin of homes and houses, or turbine blades for, we're seeing a lot of stuff happening out there, but the economics we heard, and I think Thomas spoke about that, we need these facilities, they're not there yet. Economics lining up with the technology and the investment has not happened yet, and as government we have a role to play to try and incent that investment and break down the barriers. So those are the work we are doing. We're seeing pockets of it happening in the province, but we don't see it across the province. We don't see it as a landscape. We are still burning. I won't even throw out the number here. I do have a theory on how many cubic meters we are burning, but it's around, I would say, 15 million cubic meters of fiber a year that we actually put up in smoke. And so that is something, that's an opportunity for us. to reduce the carbon emissions, meet some of those targets that Karen laid out for us yesterday, and better utilize it and store it in products in the future. So I'll leave it at that. And look forward to